6 hours and 21 minutes in flight. This is Gemini Control at Houston.
So this historic rendezvous has been achieved. Dr. Robert Gilruth, the head of the Manned Space Mercury program, our first man in space. And we can assume that Chris Kraft, the flight director, the young flight director who is the head man down there in flight control, has lighted up that long green cigar. They asked earlier from Australia when he anticipated doing that, and he told them and the men in the spacecraft that he was going to light up the long green at 6 hours into the flight, meaning after rendezvous. We can assume that that stogie is puffing away even at this moment in mission control. Perhaps someday they're going to let our live television cameras in mission control at Houston, and we can see the excitement there in the space flights. So far, the NASA people have ruled against that for fear that any cameras in the room covering live, at any rate, might upset these men behind their consoles, and they don't want to do that, of course. That's their judgment. Certainly doesn't happen to be ours. But right now, the spacecraft 6 to 10 feet apart, and the next time we hear from them, it may be that they have begun their in-plane maneuver, the fly-around of Gemini 7 by Gemini 6. Up to now in the Gemini program, astronauts have proved that a spacecraft can be maneuvered from one orbit to another, and that men can spend at least 8 days in a weightless condition. And during a recent interview, Wally Schirra talked about what he and Tom Stafford hoped to prove during their part of this dual flight.
We, of course, have succeeded in proving man is capable of the duration required for a lunar mission with Gordon Cooper and Pete Conrad. Now it is up to Tom Stafford and me to prove that we can rendezvous with another object in space. This, on the lunar mission, would be the lunar excursion module that 2 astronauts would land on the moon with, lifting off the moon and rendezvousing with the command module that put them in lunar orbit in the first place. With these 2 steps completed, we are well on the way to what we feel is our national goal of accomplishing a lunar landing and return to Earth where we would like to land.
We've had no confirmation yet either that Wally Schirra and Jim Lovell and Tom Stafford have held that Beat Army rally that they planned for space. All 3 of them are Annapolis graduates. Only Frank Borman, the command pilot of Gemini 7, is a West Point graduate. Borman and Stafford went into the Air Force. Lovell and Schirra stayed in the Navy. They're all now astronauts. Schirra, one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, the other 3 in that second class of astronauts that came in shortly thereafter. And now all 3 of them space veterans, particularly Borman and Lovell, these 2 35-year-old pilots who have set every space endurance record with their flight of Gemini 7 and seem to be standing up very well indeed. They said the other day that, in fact, just yesterday, that they were getting indicated they were getting a little bit tired up there. They said they were getting crummy and itchy after not having been able to shave or bathe for some 11 days. And incidentally, they're now a half hour, 33 minutes precisely into their 12th day of flight. They'll be coming back to Earth on Saturday morning. Now the rendezvous has been achieved so successfully, it is expected that Gemini 6 will come back tomorrow morning at 10:26 a.m. for splashdown time. CBS News color coverage of Gemini 6 and Gemini 7 will continue in a moment.
If you're in business in a lot of different countries and you're insured in each one of them, you may have to deal with all these insurance agents. But if you're in business overseas and you're insured with Continental, the only one you have to deal with is the same one you always deal with, your local Continental insurance agent. And you know how to deal with him.
This is Walter Cronkite back at our CBS News Space Center in New York, where we just reported the successful rendezvous of Gemini 6 and 7. Wally Schirra and Tom Stafford bringing Gemini 6 up within 6 feet of Gemini 7, flying around there, looking right into the cockpit windows of Gemini 7. And Gemini 7, those bearded astronauts who took off a week ago Saturday from Cape Kennedy, staring right back at them, and presumably with a great big smile. Shiraz got up there, or I think it was Lovell that took aboard a large Annapolis Brigade of Midshipmen flag, and he may be waving it in his window right now, as far as we know, at Frank Borman, the only West Point graduate of the 4 Service Academy men up there. We said a minute ago that we don't get live television coverage of these exciting moments at Mission Control for reasons best considered by the Manned Space Center and NASA's program, but they do let us tape these top moments at Mission Control in Houston. They have done that again, and we are going to be permitted in a few seconds from now to show you the video picture of Mission Control during Rendezvouz. I'm assuming that we will not have any audio again. Perhaps we will. My assistant, Sanford Sokolow, is nodding frantically here that we will get some audio. We haven't had that before. Let's see now if we can pick up those pictures from Houston taped a little while ago. This is the display board at Mission Control in Houston. They're probably holding on this picture for a moment until they've got the other one queued up for us and ready to show. This is the way the mission controllers there in Houston follow the flights on this huge display board, very similar to the one we have here at CBS. Sherraw and Stafford came close enough, we're now told, from Houston to see the 1-week growth of whiskers. Or at least that's what they said. He said, you guys sure have big beards. The crew of Gemini 6 was supposed to have said by radio. And they added, you're right in style. I don't know whether that was a reference to the Santa Claus season or the beatnik era, but at any rate, they are in style for one or the other. Assumably, neither has turned gray in space, so maybe they had more reference to beatniks than to Santa Claus. There's nothing in the Gemini 7 mission to have turned either Borman or Lovell gray, unless it might have been concern over their fellow astronauts on the ground on last Sunday when their Titan II booster ignited for 1.5 seconds and then turned off. Only the astronauts and the technicians at Houston and the Cape know how dangerous that situation could be, and it's quite certain that Borman and Lovell had a serious few minutes of concern until they learned that the pressure was dropping in the tanks and that was all was well with that Titan II on pad 19 and with Sherraw and Stafford upstairs. CBS News color coverage of Gemini 6 and Gemini 7 will continue in a moment after a pause for station identification.
This is CBS.
And this is Walter Cronkite back at our CBS News Space Center, where we've been reporting the rendezvous of Gemini 6 and 7. They're out of touch with ground control stations right now, as they are over the wilds of Brazil, the Amazon itself. They are flying within 6 or 7 feet of each other, or at least they were at our last contact some 10 minutes ago. They will be now, we assume, performing maneuvers scheduled for them, with Gemini 6 flying around Gemini 7, an in-plane maneuver, that is, without going out of orbit, and then a little later an out-of-plane maneuver. And that will just about complete their 4 hours of rendezvous. About 7 o'clock this evening, 4.5 hours after they started, it is scheduled for them to then begin to slowly pull apart, and for Gemini 6 to prepare to return to Earth tomorrow morning. Around 10:26 is the scheduled splashdown time. A moment ago, before our last commercial break, we promised you some pictures of mission control, and we're still waiting for those. It is the tape report of their the moment of rendezvous, as those flight directors down there jumped up from their seats and congratulated each other, according to the verbal report we had from Paul Haney a little while ago. NASA is holding up that videotape for unexplained reasons after telling us it was coming up. We expect to hear from them very shortly. We've now got a really big mark of success on the escutcheon of American space travel, one that this whole nation, and I'm sure the free world, was rooting us on toward. If there is any question about supremacy of one of the space competing nations over the other, it would certainly seem that the United States took the long leap forward and is ahead as of today. This is something that the Soviets have not done. They have not come anywhere near a rendezvous of this nature. The nearest they have come is about 3 miles for a few split seconds of 2 spacecraft on a ballistic missile course, that is, uncontrolled spacecraft. Here, 2 spacecraft were flown even as aircraft is flown. The environment of space that had once been called hostile seems no longer to be. The 4 spacemen up there today, and that's more than any nation has ever had up at one time, in these 2 spacecraft are functioning as pilots, flying spacecraft even as they go, and bringing them within a few feet of each other. We're now told that we do have those pictures of Gemini control at the Houston Manned Space Center, and we can show them to you now.
Houston, this is Gemini 6. The power remaining is approximately 50%.
Roger, copy. Ohms remaining 50%.
Radar check, Gemini 6 away.
Standing by, Hawaii.
One, we're showing you go here on the ground. What are you reading on 2 Charlie at this time?
Put it on 5 amp.
Say again, please.
A little over 5 amp.
Roger. Gemini 6 Hawaii, Capcom.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're showing you here on the ground. Can you give me a status?
Yeah, we're in formation with 7. Everything is go here.
Roger, congratulations. Excellent.
Thank you, a lot of fun.
Flight away.
We copy.
Okay.
You guys are really a shaggy looking group, all those wires hanging out.
Stop draping it on me.
Where are they hanging from?
Frank, it looks like it comes out at the separation plane. It might be the fiberglass. It's approximately 10 to 15 feet long.
The separation plane from the booster, right?
Affirmative.
That's exactly where you have one, too. It really belted around there when you were firing your thrusters. Looks like about 8 or 9 feet long and double wire. Right. We'll come in and take a picture of it. I'll flight away.
We copy.
Do you want to go ahead with this flight plan update to each of them, or do you want to just hold off?
I ask them if they're ready to copy.
Okay. 7 away. Go ahead.
Well, that wasn't quite the scene that Mission Control had promised to us. They'd promised a moment of rendezvous when those flags you saw on their little stands on the consoles of the flight directors were broken out. That film was a little bit later. That the moment that you saw some of these people wandering around in there, well, most of the time they're sitting right at those consoles, and at the moment that rendezvous was achieved and confirmed, that they were 100 feet in and going in closer, like other great moments for all of us at football games or at any other great event, the men behind these consoles stood up and a cheer went up and they broke out these American flags that they'd all been storing away. It was an unprecedented event in Mission Control. The last time any of us remember anything like that happening was on our very first manned space flight when Alan Shepard made his suborbital 15-minute flight down the Atlantic missile range. Wally Schirra, we're now advised when told that, or when congratulated by the ground control station, says that sure was a big deal, talking about the first moments of rendezvous. We have had no confirmation, as we say, that they've started their maneuvers up there, the in-plane and out-of-plane fly-arounds, but it is assumed by all concerned that they have. Today's success, as I was suggesting a moment ago, gives the United States a major first in the space race because this business of rendezvous is such a major and important part of getting to the moon and back. The Soviets brought to space two spacecraft together, as I said, in 1962, again another few miles apart in 1963, but this was not in any sense a real rendezvous. Charles von Fremd asked Dr. Charles Sheldon of the President's Space Council how this U.S. effort compares with past Russian successes.
It's a very real advance over the 1962 and 63 Soviet experiments. They were the first to bring ships fairly close together, but they never completed the kinds of maneuvers that we will hopefully see with this flight, to bring ships actually in very close position to each other.
What you're saying, then, is that the Soviets on those two occasions lacked the capability of changing orbital flight plans.
That's right. On the 62 case, they made a direct ascent to bring the ships within about 3.5 miles of each other, and that was all they could do, and the ships then drifted apart. In 1963, they came within 3 miles, but they were on a crossing kind of orbit where there was no chance whatsoever of maneuvering close up.
Well, if the Soviets had this very close capability, and after all, 3 miles within two 17,000-mile-an-hour vehicles in space is pretty close, why do you think they have not achieved the capability which we hope for in Gemini 7 and 6?
I think this is a real question, a mystery that hasn't been satisfactorily answered. With the kind of demonstration that they did so long ago, we certainly thought that before this time we would have seen it. It certainly suggests that the present vehicle combination that the Russians have been using does not have within it the capability to do this needed maneuvering or the docking of actually bringing two ships together to lock them into one combination.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot because we never know what tomorrow morning's papers or broadcasts are going to say. Excuse me, but is it your feeling now, sir, that the Soviets do not have this close rendezvous and docking technique which we are pursuing in the Gemini program?
Well, all I can say to that is that they haven't demonstrated it, that we know. When we will see it is something that only the future will answer. I certainly think it's going to come along very shortly because it's such a logical extension of space technology, and it also is one which they have been promising us for some little time.
Well, maybe without sounding super patriotic or chauvinistic, maybe this is the day for that even. I think we can safely say that in all aspects of space exploration, manned space and unmanned space flight, the United States is now, as of this moment at any rate, in the lead. We have done more in the 3 major space races now than have the Soviets. We have in the race in pure scientific research, put up far more scientific satellites than have they. In the matter of practical applications in space, we have done far more with our communications and weather and other satellites, including the unfortunately nicknamed Spy in the Sky, SAMOS, which takes pictures of the ground around the world. And now in manned spaceflight, although still behind in the size of the capsules, the spacecraft we can put up, we're putting more sophisticated spacecraft up than they are, true spacecraft that can maneuver. We proved it today. They can maneuver and meet up in space. The biggest step forward since the first man went out there. And I think that, well, I was about to say that I think that all of us in the space who have been covering space are particularly glad that one Wally Schirra could have a part in this historic day. He's a favorite of all of ours, and in a moment I'm going to ask Chuck Van Fremd, who's down in Houston and an old-timer in the space coverage, to talk about it, Wally, with me. But right now, Paul Haney at Houston.
We are estimating here that Schirra and Stafford used 175 pounds of fuel to complete that rendezvous. That's a figure from the terminal phase initiation point on into the actual rendezvous point, some 6 to 10 feet apart. We show spacecraft 6 with 365 pounds of fuel remaining. I'll emphasize that that is a very conservative usage of fuel to achieve what those two achieved in at last 130 degrees from the southern tip of Africa to a point out over the western Pacific. We were prepared to expend at least twice that much in order to conduct that rendezvous attempt. Here now is some tape conversation of the two talking to each other, occasionally talking to the Rosenau Victor off the south coast, off the coast of South America.
Houston flight RKV, voice check.
Go ahead.
Roger.
What'd you say?
I was just having a voice check.
Roger, read you loud and clear. How me?
Loud and clear. It's rolled out, but it's the same thing day after day. That's a good mark to tell us anything. RKV has telemetry solid on both spacecraft.
Roger, RKV.
That's Gemini 7, RKV. Go ahead, RKV. Gemini 7. Roger, we'd like you to bring stack 2C back on the line. Come on. Back on. Roger.
Did you get an open circuit voltage before they turn it on, please?
Looks like it's about the same thing for the rest of it. Took it off. Roger, what was your open circuit voltage before you turned it back on? 31.5 volts. Say again?
31.5.
5 volts. Roger. Oh, what are you reading now? That's 2C current. 2C current is reading 6 amps and closed circuit voltage is 25. Roger. We're reading 5.5 on 2C on the ground. Say again, Gemini 7.
I said we have company tonight.
You sure do. We'd like to know how you can see the act lights on 6.
Here are the act lights.
We have a dock light control.
Did they see the dock light?
Did you want me?
Right, yeah.
We picked you up all over the 70 cycle box, your doctor.
Yeah.
That the conversation between Gemini 6 and 7 out over the South Atlantic, and the communication with the Rosenaught Victor, the tracking station there, recorded just a few moments ago. Still no word that they're doing their in and out of plane maneuvers, but the assumption is that they will be shortly. And then in another couple of hours from now, about 3 hours from now, they'll be separating to both crews go to sleep for the night, and then tomorrow morning for Gemini 6 to return to Earth, Gemini 7 to come back on Saturday morning, having completed the longest flight yet, by almost double of anybody in space. I was saying a moment ago that I think all of us are tickled to death that 42-year-old Navy Captain Wally Schirra should be one of the men to make this historic flight today, and is really, in a sense, the key man, I suppose. And Chuck Von Frem down at the Cape, I know agrees with me on that. Don't you, Chuck?
I think, Walter, one thing both of us recognized many more years ago than we'd like to recall is that a reporter cannot enjoy the luxury of getting personally involved with public figures. But as you pointed out earlier today, for the first time since the launch of Alan Shepard, supposedly hard-boiled and cynical newsmen were cheering, and it was mostly a tribute to Wally Schirra, who has that funny kind of chemistry personality that gets to most reporters. He, as a middle-aged man, 42, is what most middle-aged men of 42 would like to be. The dashing gung-ho type, handsome, still with a full head of hair, a man at the peak of his career, a man who wakes up every day and is just so happy that another day has rolled around. And he also speaks his mind. You recall that very well, a famous interview he gave you in which he criticized his superiors for their use of John Glenn following the first American orbital flight. For the last 3 years, Schirra has campaigned constantly for the mission he's flying today. He knows it may be his last flight. He wanted it desperately. He got his wish, and he did the job. Walter?
Chuck, talking about Wally Schirra at 42, making him sound like an old man in space, and in some ways he is, compared to the rest of those flying right now by a few years. Sounds like you're making him the Enzio Pinza of outer space. CBS News color coverage of Gemini 6 and Gemini 7 will continue in a moment.
What have we got against colds? Over 600 tiny time pills in a contact capsule that work up to 12 full hours. Each one smaller than the head of a pin. Yet if you have a cold, a tiny contact time pill like this could help stop a sniffle minutes from now, or help you breathe freely up to 12 hours from now. Other contact time pills check sneezes, clear your stuffy nose. Many contact time pills work fast for fast relief. Many work later for continuous relief. Put more than 600 of these tiny time pills together in one capsule, and it's easy to see why contact is so remarkably effective. All day or all night. What have we got against colds? The good medicine in Contact. Today's largest selling cold medication at your pharmacy.
One sad note here today in the space program, the aircraft, the private plane in which Dr. W. Randolph Lovelace, the head of the space medicine program, had been flying with his wife and a private pilot from Aspen, Colorado to Albuquerque, was found smashed into a mountainside near Aspen, no sign of life. However, elsewhere in the space program, a day of triumph for America as Gemini 7 and Gemini 6 achieved the first manned spacecraft rendezvous. CBS News live color coverage of recovery of Gemini 6 begins at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Our CBS News Space Alerts as developments warrant our next regular Gemini report at 5 p.m. Walter Cronkite, CBS News Space Center.
Project Gemini, Rendezvous in Space. This is CBS.